From the studios of KPFK Pacifica Radio in Los Angeles, this is Uprising, and I'm Sonali Kolhatkar. It's Thursday, April 16th, 2015. The largest ever mass demonstrations of low-wage workers in the United States took place in hundreds of cities yesterday. We'll bring you a report back from one of the gatherings. And independent filmmakers of color are fighting back against what they see as an effort by PBS to try to sideline their work. Yoruba Richen will tell us more. Plus, mass protests against the world's largest optical telescope on Mauna Kea are being led by native Hawaiian activists. We'll speak with two of them about why they oppose the 30-meter telescope. That's coming up after the news. Joining us now to analyze today's headlines is Chenjerai Kumanyika. He's an assistant professor of communication studies at Clemson University. Hi, Chenjerai.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing well, thanks for joining us. The Iraqi city of Ramadi is on the verge of being taken over by the Islamic State. News reports detail that fierce fighting overnight has led to the capture of at least 3 nearby villages. Thousands of people have already fled, and according to Iraqi officials, suicide bombers deployed by ISIS have targeted checkpoints on government buildings. The assault on Ramadi has changed the current in favor of ISIS once more, just as the U.S. and its allies claim they were on a winning streak in their offensive following the recapture of Tikrit. Ramadi is important in that it is a Sunni-dominated city that the Islamic State is likely claiming allegiance to. It was the site of major battles during the U.S. war and does not have a heavy Shia presence, either in the form of militias or civilians. Well, Chandra, is the battle for Ramadi demonstrating that the U.S. fight against ISIS is far more complicated and difficult than previously thought?
I think it is, and I think it really shows that, dealing with military solutions is a little bit more complicated. After Tikrit, there was a lot of talk about the success of airstrikes, and it is true that that airstrikes have played an important role in, protecting some of the citizens in regional areas. But, there's a great article on Al Jazeera that really talks about the strategy. And what I thought was interesting was the way it focuses on the non-military solutions as in addition to military solutions. So we're talking about things like, looking at issues of ideology, focusing on strengthening local political governments, and really trying to address the conditions that have made it possible for ISIS to spread into these various areas of Iraq. So it's complicated.
And anti-immigrant sentiment is high in South Africa. For the last few weeks, a wave of violence aimed at foreign nationals from countries like Ethiopia, Nigeria, Malawi, and Pakistan has resulted in at least 4 deaths in South Africa. Government forces in eastern Johannesburg fired tear gas and rubber bullets in an effort to disperse a group of anti-immigrant protesters today. And President Jacob Zuma made a public address saying, quote, "What is happening in our country is not acceptable." A counter-protest in support of the immigrant community in Durban today drew thousands of South African activists. Thousands of foreign nationals have been taking refuge in shelters. South Africa's unemployment rate is extremely high, with the official figures hovering at 25%. Chandra, does this story sound like a case of xenophobic forces taking advantage of people's frustrations with the economy, just as we're seeing in other countries like Germany, Greece, even the U.S.?
Absolutely. This is another example of how the long effects of colonialism and current impact of unequal wealth distribution in South Africa and other places create situations where groups of poor people mistakenly view each other as the primary threat to their economic and cultural security. So, fortunately, we do see this sentiment being countered by marches like the one taking place today in Durban. But there are also concerns, some of the foreign nationals feel that the government has not taken enough of a role. They say that they need government protection and not marches. I think our role is to really keep focused on the underlying economic conditions that really are the source of this kind of xenophobia.
And finally, here in the United States, 2 related cases challenging the authority of the Environmental Protection Agency are being heard in a D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals today. The cases are being brought by the 2 largest coal companies in the U.S. and more than a dozen states led by coal producer West Virginia. The coal lobby contends that the EPA does not have the right under the Clean Air Act to curb greenhouse gas emissions and thereby lead to the shuttering of their industry. Both sides will argue over a technical difference in the House and Senate versions of the bill that passed in 1990. Ultimately, the case is expected to end up at the Supreme Court. Coal-producing states are accusing the Obama administration of wanting to harm their economies. President Obama has sought to use existing law like the Clean Air Act and regulatory agencies like the EPA to address the dire situation of climate change. Well, Chenjerai, how important is this case, particularly given that Congress has not and likely will not take action to curb climate change, and the Clean Air Act and the EPA are the only limited tools that we have on a federal level?
That's right. These are limited tools that we have. And in situations like this, what I think has to be done is to maintain focus on the issue at hand. The arguments against the legislation are kind of amazing in that regard because they almost seem to make the points we're trying to make. Patrick Morrisey, Attorney General of West Virginia, said he was worried that this kind of regulation was going to transform the American energy economy. Yes, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to transform the American energy economy and make it more sustainable. Also, there was fears that this was taking advantage of a clerical error. I see that what's happening is the clerical issues are being used to sort of confuse and obfuscate the underlying environmental issues. So we need to give the EPA the authority to make this change. It's already too late, and we have to push forward.
Thank you so much, Chenjerai, for joining us as usual. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you.
Our daily Newsflash guest expert on Thursdays is Chenjerai Kumanyika, Assistant Professor of Communication Studies at Clemson University. This is Uprising. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Uprising. I'm Sonali Kolhatkar. Goldman Sachs is celebrating today. The investment conglomerate that profited off of the subprime mortgage crisis posted its highest earnings in 5 years, with its net income growing by 40% to $2.84 billion. The numbers surpassed all economic estimates. Meanwhile, a new report this morning found that CEO pay in the U.S. jumped by more than 12% last year, even as millions of American workers continue to struggle with depressed wages, no benefits, irregular schedules, or even no jobs at all. A growing movement is now fighting back, sick and tired of the obscenity of inequality. Thousands of workers around the country from a wide variety of industries walked out of their jobs yesterday in hundreds of cities to demand a minimum of $15 an hour in wages. A growing coalition of organizations, unions, and individuals representing the fast food, retail, service industries, and even academia joined together. The Guardian dubbed it the largest protest by low-wage workers in U.S. history. Even presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, who's eager to campaign on a populist platform, tweeted, quote, "Every American deserves a fair shot at success. Fast food and childcare workers shouldn't have to march in streets for living wages." A starting point for the fight for higher wages and the right to a union began with about 200 fast food workers in New York City only 2 years ago who walked out of their jobs in protest. Yesterday's Tax Day demonstrations marked a new stage in organizing that has challenged cities, states, and the federal government and the business world to pay workers a living wage. In New York, up to 10,000 people marched in the streets. In Los Angeles, where this program is based, more than 1,000 workers gathered near downtown and marched in a raucous demonstration. The Uprising crew was at the demonstrations, and I spoke with several workers about why they were there.
My name is Sophia Chang, and I'm a community organizer with Rock LA, which is the Restaurant Opportunity Center of Los Angeles.
And so are members of this organization here today? What is their main reason for being here?
Rock LA, we're a worker center for restaurant workers in Los Angeles, and we're here today to fight for $15 as part of a comprehensive package to raise the minimum wage, have real enforcement of wage and hour laws, and to also get paid sick days. And today the focus is really on a $15 minimum wage.
And I'm assuming that restaurant workers are particularly hard hit by low wages because their wages are often dependent on tips?
That's exactly right. Restaurant workers, the majority, front of house, back of house, make minimum wage. The median income for a restaurant worker in Los Angeles is $15,600. So that's hovering right at the minimum wage level. And the restaurant lobby, the corporate restaurant lobby, the California Restaurant Association, has actually been fighting to create a sub-minimum wage for restaurant workers. What they're proposing is that restaurant workers, and anybody who makes tips, should continue to make $9 the minimum wage, and they're supposed to supplement the rest by tips. So we're here to say $15 for everybody, and then also for all tipped workers too, need a minimum wage.
How amazing is this gathering? It's one of many happening around the country, and it's not just workers in the service industry or the fast food industry. It's a pretty big coalition.
Today is really amazing. You can see all around you. It's a mix of workers' rights group, faith leaders are out here. There's a lot of students from USC because we're right by USC, which is a huge density of fast food restaurants. And so I think today is just one part of actions across the nation. It's a growing movement for wage justice and the idea that someone working full-time shouldn't be living in poverty.
So are restaurant workers also demanding a union?
Restaurant workers, there are some unions for service workers. So for example, Unite here, Local 11 here locally in Los Angeles, they represent some restaurant workers. I think the point that we're trying to make is union or not, everyone deserves a living wage, and also enforcement of all wage and hour laws.
And so at this point, you have in a city like Los Angeles some support from city council, from the mayor, and so there is a big difference when you have elected officials who at least pay lip service to higher minimum wages.
I think it really reflects the organizing and just the movement across the nation. It's inevitable now, it feels like, to raise the minimum wage, and everybody here is just going to continue pushing for that.
Do you feel that the issue of $15 an hour and raising the minimum wage should be looked at not just as an economic justice issue, but also as a racial justice issue? I see primarily people of color here.
I'm really glad you brought that up because it's absolutely a racial justice issue, and I'd also say gender justice issue. So, I'm with Rock, so I can speak a little bit more about restaurant workers in particular. But one of the reasons why we're saying $15, livable wage for everybody is because we know that service workers are disproportionately people of color and women of color. When you looked at the tipped workforce, one reason we absolutely oppose a sub-minimum wage for tipped workers is because over 60% of the tipped workforce in Los Angeles are women. And women tipped workers make less than male tipped workers. So for example, I'll just throw out some more statistics. 70% of API workers, Asian Pacific Islander workers, and Latino workers make less than $24,000 a year with tips. So it's absolutely a racial justice issue and a gender justice issue.
Are people risking their jobs by showing up today? Have people taken the day off or walked out of their jobs?
I know there's a lot of fast food workers here who are going public, maybe for the first time, some repeatedly, the demand for a livable wage. And I think the point is that there's so much community support here. The message to workers is that you have a lot of support, and if you come out in an organized way, you're going to have more people backing you up.
Are you optimistic that $15 is an achievable goal in the near future?
I think the writing's on the wall. This is only one of many actions across the U.S., so I think we're all moving towards a livable wage, and workers and community members are at the front lines fighting for that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sonali.
My name is Rachel Roski, and I'm an adjunct professor at the Roski School of Art and Design.
And you are asking for $15 an hour minimum wage?
Well, we're working with the larger group of people asking for $15 minimum wage, like fast food workers and so forth. At USC, we're actually organizing the faculty, the non-tenured faculty, the not full-time contracted faculty, asking for fair wages, transparency, health benefits.
How poorly one might imagine that professors tend to make better money and have better, incomes than fast food workers.
Yeah, it's actually like a total misconception because that's how it was in the past. When I was in school, most of my professors were full-time and they made a decent living. But nowadays, I have to teach at 4 different colleges. I teach at 4 different classes at 3 different colleges to make ends meet, and I have no health care for my husband and I. Yeah.
What do you teach?
I teach painting and drawing.
And why has it gotten this way?
Well, as tuition increases, basically they've taken this corporate model of higher education where you have more money going into administration, fewer full-time jobs, and then they're getting their most of the professors on the cheap, you know, for adjunct, part-time, that we're told semester at a time. We get paid by the class, and we don't know from semester to semester how many classes we have. So they're saving a lot of money. It's working for them. So they're getting a bargain. They're getting like a really great deal, and they're making a ton of money.
So it's a fast foodization of academia?
Exactly. It's a corporate model of, you know, the 1%. You know, they have the 1% in administration that have all the power, make all the decisions with no transparency, and then the adjuncts are really the workhorses. The adjuncts and non-tenured faculty are really, you know, doing all the kind of blood, sweat, and tears of the hard work with the students on the ground, and we're the ones that are totally left out of decision making, not fairly compensated, and have no job security whatsoever.
Now, what sort of ripple effect does that have on the rest of society? Because college education is supposed to be the path to better jobs. If professors aren't being paid well and students don't have decent access to education, does that not impact people even beyond those immediately affected, like the professors?
Absolutely. I mean, it makes me question the whole higher education system in general. I mean, student loan debt, my own education. I have a very expensive, you know, master's degree from Yale. So yeah, it makes me question the value of my own education when the jobs that were a possibility for me when I graduated that existed 15, 20 years ago, like, really don't exist anymore. It's kind of a fake dream at this point to go into, like, to have the same quality of life. It's like the middle class lifestyle that, yeah.
So if people don't have an incentive to get an education because that's not getting them a better income, there are going to be more workers available for the low-wage industries, and in a way we're just seeing a complete devolution, it seems, of how our economy interfaces with workers.
Absolutely, absolutely, for sure.
What do you hope will happen? I mean, because if the city of Los Angeles or the state of California does give workers $15 an hour, how can that impact professors, or is this something that is up to campus administrators?
Well, I think it's, you know, the power in numbers, you know, the idea of people getting out on the street and joining together and, like, standing up and raising our voices and asking for better, like asking for more out of the 1% in power, you know, the 1% at the top of these corporations that pay the minimum wage. It's really like a parallel to higher ed, and I just think, you know, it could be a ripple effect from one industry to the other.
Thank you so much. Best of luck to you.
Thank you.
My name is Betty Simmons, and I'm a child care provider.
And why are you here today?
I'm here today to help the supporters, to support the families that I care for, to try to get these good wages. I'm also here today because of families that I have. I have a family client that she has education. She's a graduate of UC Riverside, and right now, since she can't find a job in her career, she has a job at Walmart making less than $10 an hour. So if this mother could get this $15 an hour, she can afford child care. Right now, if it wasn't for the agency that's helping her, she could not afford to pay me money to take care of her child. So it's a support for that, and I have a lot of families that I take care of that they don't have the means to pay. They're working 2 jobs, working at night, going to school, trying to provide care for their children. Some can just barely pay it, and some, if it wasn't for the agencies, they wouldn't be able to pay. But there's still thousands of family members out there who don't have accessible child care.
So it's interesting, I asked you about why you're here, and you talked about the families who are your clients rather than your own income, and that's, I think you're the first worker I've talked to who's put it in that way, talking about families who can't afford your services. Whose responsibility is it to pay workers like yourself to do childcare?
Well, if the families can afford it, then there is programs that will. If the families could make the money, then they would be able to pay us for themselves. And my main thing is if they can pay it, then they'll be able to pay us for the care. And sometimes it's not all about you. It is for the families, but then it recycles itself. We as child care workers, when we pay our assistants, if we have them, by the time we pay for the meals we serve the children, we make less than $4.90 an hour ourselves when we get done doing all of that.
Wow.
You know, so it's been averaged out. We make about $4.98 an hour when we take care of the children for what we have to do, paying out and paying our bills. And we rely on the agencies like the families do to pay us if they're going through a program. And there's been times that I had to go and pull out my credit cards to pay my bills because the agency did not pay us on a timely manner. So it's very important to be out here today.
Do you have your own child care center?
No, not a center. I'm licensed by the state. I'm a small child care in my home.
And so how many children do you look after every day?
I have 6, and I'm in the process of getting 2 more, so I'll be 8 children.
Do you love your job?
I love children. I love my job.
I can tell.
Yes, I do. It's all about the children, you know, and when they're away from their families, we're like second families to these children, and to assist and help the parents with the children, you know. So that's what it's all about. But if the parents could get this $15 an hour for the low-income workers, not just for the parents that I take care of, for the fast food workers, everybody, you cannot support a family on $9 an hour, $10 an hour. 15 would be a big boost for the whole economy.
So this is an issue where the workers who are your clients, whose children you take care of, need to make a decent wage so that you can make a decent wage so that children get taken care of. There's a lot of connections there.
It recycles itself. The parents it's affecting the low income, and what we really need is California needs to look into it and be able to afford early child care and education. That's what it's all about, because it's about the children for child care. But now, speaking of the child care, just for the families like the fast food workers or home care workers, we take care of people. And if they can't make the money, then they can't pay us. But it recycles itself. If they make the 15, then we all benefit from that. And even us, because like I said, $4.94 an hour is about what we average out by the time we take care of all of our expenses.
Now, how do you respond to business owners who say, well, if we pay workers $15 an hour, we'll have to close down our businesses and there just won't be any jobs and everybody will suffer?
Well, they probably would say that, but how would their businesses close? If everybody is making a decent wage, money goes back into the community, then the economy is boosted, so that's not true.
Why do you think the corporate world is so bent on paying workers so little? I mean, they have so much money has gone to the top. They have billions and trillions in profits.
Well, there's only one word I have for that, and that's greed. It's greed, because they said there is money, and what most of the businesses don't realize, without workers like us, they would have no business. They would have no business.
Thank you so much.
More than welcome. Thank you.
My name is Jose Paz. I'm a fast food worker at McDonald's.
My name is Myra Flores, and I work at McDonald's.
And did both of you walk out of your jobs today, or did you take a sick day or a vacation day?
Today I didn't walk off, but I didn't show up for work today.
Yeah, I did walk out today. I stopped the labor for McDonald's today, and I feel really great about that.
Why are you here? Why did you walk off your job?
I walk off my job because I think that we deserve respect, and that we do deserve the raise that we're asking for to stop living in poverty, especially because people like me, I'm a single mother. It's really hard to maintain, our kids. And what I really want is to get this raise, so that would be awesome, and it would give me the tools to provide her a better future.
What is it like to be working at McDonald's for those who don't know what it's like to be in the fast food industry? Can you make ends meet at all?
It's harder than it looks. Not only it's just the labor. Sometimes they're too demanding. They take advantage of you, and not only that, they sometimes cut your hours, and sometimes you don't get paid for the weeks that you actually worked.
How do you respond when fast food industries say, well, these are stepping stone jobs for young folks who are having part-time positions before they go to school or while they're in school?
That's not true. There's parents there working for like 20, 30 years. I've been there for 10 years, and it's really not that story that they're telling. Like, there's students working there, but there's also parents working there to maintain their family. And that's why we're here to apply for the 15 and a union.
What would $15 an hour mean personally for you in your lives? What would you be able to do now that you can't do now?
I'm a full-time student, so school tuition is expensive. So with $15 an hour, it will definitely help me a lot for my school.
And you?
To me, it would help me a lot and not to struggle and either pay my rent or pay my bills or even take my daughter to the doctor and provide her medication.
Do either of you get benefits through your work?
No, we don't. I don't get no benefits.
No, we don't. No.
So are you enrolled in Obamacare?
No.
No.
So what happens when your daughter falls sick?
When my daughter or I get sick, I have to, take her to the doctor, but pay for that. And it comes out of my pocket, and they don't see that. That's why we're here, too, to fight for that and get those benefits that we need and we deserve.
Those are just some of the voices that marched, of people, workers that marched in Los Angeles and around the country yesterday as part of the Fight for 15 campaign. This is Uprising. We'll be right back. This is Uprising. I'm Sonali Kolhatkar. Did you know that Uprising is now a TV show as well as a radio show? You can watch the show on Free Speech TV, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel for a very small monthly fee, which helps us sustain the cost of TV production. Find out more at www.youtube.com/uprisingwithsonali. Ever notice how dominated your TV screens are by white men? Not only the hosts, but also the guests. And this is true not just in commercial media on the big networks like Fox, ABC, and NBC, but also in public television. The group Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting found some years ago that 82% of all guests on PBS shows were men and 72% were white men. In recent years, that has started to change. Diverse filmmakers in particular have begun creating vibrant programming. Shows like POV and Independent Lens increased representation of people of color and issues important to us on PBS screens. But last December, PBS's New York affiliate, WNET, abruptly decided to move those two programs off of their primetime slot. A group of filmmakers organizing under the umbrella of Indie Caucus responded with a social media campaign. They were worried that the move to undermine such diverse shows could set a poor precedent that could further erode the already precarious presence of diversity in public media. My guest is Yoruba Richen, independent filmmaker active with Indie Caucus, and she now joins me. Welcome to Uprising, Yoruba.
Hi there, Sonali.
And I should mention you've also been involved in Democracy Now!, which of course is heard on Pacifica.
Absolutely. I worked there for a couple of years as I was making my first film, actually, my first PBS film.
Now, first, how important are shows like POV and Independent Lens for those in our audience who might be unfamiliar with them? How well do they showcase issues important to people of color?
I can't overstate the importance of POV and Lens and dealing with issues that are really relevant to folks of color, to our community, and to voices that you don't often get to hear on mainstream media. Everything from the broadcasting of these programs to helping fund and
Yoruba, we're having some trouble with your audio, and we're going to call you on the phone while we keep your video stream up. So if we're just going to be calling you on the phone right now, and we'll just get your audio in that manner. Yoruba Richen is an independent filmmaker. She's active with Indie Caucus, former Democracy Now! Producer, and we're talking to her about what is unfolding at PBS, where representation of people of color and diverse programming had started to increase and now faces a possible threat. And we're going to be discussing how indie filmmakers like Yoruba Richen have been fighting back and have been trying to make these issues among the top priorities that PBS faces. So Yoruba, we're trying to call you right now. If you can pick your phone up and answer us. There we go. So we're going to try to get you on right now. Do bear with us. Yoruba Richen is organizing with Indie Caucus, a group of independent filmmakers. Do we have you on?
Yep, I'm here. Can
Perfect.
you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Excellent. Okay, so you were starting to say how important POV and independent lens are.
Absolutely. So I can't overstate the importance of these two programs, Independent Lens and POV, to dealing with issues that are, and examining issues that are so important to communities of color. And I really speak broadly, in terms of when we say communities of color. Sometimes we just mean black and white, but we really see in these programs filmmakers and subjects that really, that really stretch the range of issues that are important to these communities. And not only just in terms of featuring them on their programs, but in terms of funding, of helping to fund them and getting them made, support, and getting it out into the community. I mean, these shows have been central to doing that, and also with that, elevating documentaries to this status that we now hear of a golden age of documentaries. I mean, POV and Independent Lens were the originators of that.
Right. And Yoruba, what sort of audiences do these shows have on WNET and other PBS affiliates? Does the primetime slot that they have enjoyed make a big difference in bringing audiences to them?
Absolutely. I mean,
and by the way, we can still see your videos if you could look into the camera. Thanks.
Oh, okay. Yes, of course. I mean, obviously having a prime time, that's why they call it prime time slot, is when, that's when people watch television. And even though we have, we have the onslaught of digital and watching on the web, and people are watching differently, most people are still getting their shows from watching TV. So it's very important that these programs stay on some kind of primetime slot. And we've seen the audience increase for these shows over the last few years. And what I think is interesting too is that these programs have high viewership of audiences of color. When you look at, the viewership of those programs versus other PBS programs, they have very high viewership. So they are reaching a community, that public media is, mandated to serve.
So then, Yoruba, why would WNET move to push these out of their primetime slots? Is it a matter of ratings because they feel that even if there are high numbers of people of color watching, their overall audiences are not big enough?
Well, they have what they said, publicly and in writing about this is that the audience drops off on this after their Monday night Antique Roadshow. But there's been research to show that that audience, that Antique Roadshow audience, drops off after any paired after any program, and that it's a very sort of movable audience. I mean, there's definitely been sort of back and forth about whether that's the case. But for them it is. I mean, what they say that it is about ratings, and their arts programming is what garners, the most ratings and thus the most funding for them. And I'm sympathetic to it. I mean, I understand this is public media. It's not a network. It's not commercial television where you're getting advertising dollars. However, I think there's ways in which these films can help to garner that audience and to help to cultivate that audience that would support PBS.
Exactly, and I think you really hit the nail on the head here, because when a TV programs and TV channels and networks rely on funding and ratings to drive their programming, they're going to end up with very homogeneous types of programming. But if they want to invest in programming that's important in terms of increasing diversity and representation of people of color, it literally is an investment that they have to make. And rather than looking at them as cash cows, they have to look at them as investments. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And just so you know, I think I lost picture. I'm not sure if
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay. Absolutely. And the thing that's interesting that we've seen in the last bunch of years with documentary film is that we have to, especially when we're doing social issue documentaries, we have to find our audience and grow our audience. And, we call it distribution, we call it engagement, outreach and engagement. And it's a very important part of the filmmaking process. And, there's been talks, and I feel positive about this, that there's a way in which indie filmmakers can work with these stations to bring their audiences that they've worked with, through making their film, to bring their audiences to the stations. Because that's where these stations are, that's where they're seeing these films.
Right.
I mean, my film, The New Black, was aired on Independent Lens, and we were part of an initiative called Community Cinema, and we had, more than 100 screenings throughout the country before it aired on PBS. It aired on PBS, and it was an amazing process. The kind of people that came to these screenings, where they really did outreach to these communities. And I think there could be a really beautiful way of turning that audience that comes out for those community screenings to supporters of their PBS.
Well, finally, Yoruba, where is this case now of PBS's decision on how to encourage, to put it lightly, its affiliates to carry in primetime slots programs like POV and Independent Lens? When will the decision come down, and what do you think might happen?
Well, I think from what I understand, we know that there was a listening tour where they hit about 4 cities, listening to filmmakers and community members about this decision, and there was definitely overwhelming support for keeping these shows in the primetime slot. My understanding is that there's ongoing negotiations around this, and that it's still unclear exactly what will happen. But I think it's really important that people from that viewers also speak up, and viewers also, say and voice their support for keeping these programs on. I mean, we're the public, we're the people that they serve. So that's really a really important part of it. I mean, I'm hopeful, and we're hopeful that, that they will do what they say they want to do, which is to continue to elevate independent documentary filmmaking. I know there are negotiations that are happening, and I expect that it's expected that there will be a decision in the next, couple months. And it just doesn't, I mean, just yesterday, as I was reading, that's always, they're always writing about in, the Times and in these major newspapers about documentary film, and how the investment that even other broadcasters are making in film, documentary film, CNN, Netflix, in our
Right,
Showtime,
exactly. So
HBO, are like really, really investing and highlighting their documentary offerings. And PBS, why would PBS want to cede that position?
Right.
Especially when they were the first ones doing it.
Give out a website where our audience who cares about this issue, I'm sure, can encourage PBS to invest in its diverse programming.
Yes, you know what? I think I'll have to send that to you.
Okay. Well, people can also look up Indie Caucus, which is a group that you've organized with. I want to thank you so much, Yoruba, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yoruba Richen is an independent filmmaker. Her film, one of her films is entitled The New Black. She's also a former Democracy Now! Producer and active with the group Indie Caucus. This is Uprising. When we come back, we'll go to Hawaii to find out why people are protesting against the largest optical telescope in the world. Stay tuned. The island of Hawaii is the site of major protests these days. The reason? The building of the world's largest optical telescope on the summit of Mauna Kea on the Big Island. Mauna Kea is one of two mountains on Hawaii and is already home to a number of internationally run telescopes that take advantage of clear skies above the clouds. But Native Hawaiian activists who have for years opposed the building of telescopes have made this new telescope their latest target. The 30-meter telescope, or TMT, will have a mirror almost 100 feet in diameter. Earlier this week, professors and students at the University of Hawaii's Honolulu campus walked out of classes in protest of the telescope that has been spearheaded by the California Institute of Technology in Pasadena in collaboration with UH. The governments of the United States, China, Japan, India, and Canada are also partnering on the project. Some weeks ago, activists blocked access of construction workers on Mauna Kea to the telescope site, with dozens of arrests resulting. There was a temporary moratorium on construction by Governor David Ige, which was just extended for another week. But many have remained near the summit in tents. Native Hawaiians consider Mauna Kea's summit sacred. There have been solidarity protests all over the U.S. and the world. Joining us now live from Hawaii is Jonathan Osorio. He's a professor at the Kamakaʻokalani Center for Hawaiian Studies at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. His recent publications include The Value of Hawaii, Knowing the Past and Shaping the Future, which he co-edited and authored, and Dismembering Lahui, the History of the Hawaiian Nation to 1887. He is also a composer and singer and has been recording Hawaiian music and since 1975. Now, joining us live from near the summit of Mauna Kea by phone is Kahukahi Kanuha, a young activist and preschool teacher living in Kona on the Big Island. He's been camping on Mauna Kea at the 9,000-foot level for weeks now, along with a number of other activists intent on stopping the building of the TMT. I'd like to start with John first. Jonathan, can you explain why there's such opposition from many Native Hawaiians and others to the TMT? Astronomers are saying that this is in the interests of science and learning. It's not an issue of corporate exploitation of resources. It's consistent with Hawaiian principles of exploration, given that some of the earliest astronomers were Hawaiian people. How do you respond?
Well, you know, the telescope corporations basically have had a long time to be able to refine their narrative about the building of this, but actually the 31-meter telescope comes at the end of a very long period of sort of explosion of telescopes on that mountain that were really not envisioned by anyone when the university made that lease. And what has actually happened is that many of those telescopes have gone in really ignoring the impact that it had on the mountain They were not done correctly. And in fact, this morning in the newspaper, there's an article that quotes several people who are saying, that this is a project that's really being done right, that because of Native Hawaiian input and consultation over the last few years, they can rest assured that, as sort of in opposition to all of the other projects that came before this, this one will be somehow above board. But it is also, by many degrees of scale, the very largest thing that we've ever seen. Its sheer size, and the fact that it's going to, basically require the excavation of a fairly substantial crater on that part of the mountain in order to build it. These are the things that have sort of added fuel to people's resistance to the building of this telescope.
Now, I understand on the one hand, Mauna Kea is considered extremely sacred for Native Hawaiians, and maybe you could explain that for our audience here in the mainland United States, but it's also an issue of environmental preservation, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Basically what we're looking at here is a conservation district. And what has actually been created within this conservation district is an industrial park. This means, in effect, that when we designate a place conservation, if we don't treat it as a conservation area, it causes us to wonder whether or not that designation has any real meaning whatsoever for policymakers. And you really do need to talk to, you need to talk to those people who are on the mountain,
right,
to find out why, they understand this place is sacred.
And actually, that's a really good segue.
Bodies there.
That's a good segue to our guest, Kahukahi Kanuha, who is a young activist. He's a preschool teacher teaching at Kona on the Big Island. He's been camping in Mauna Kea at the 9,000-foot level, not at the actual summit, for a number of weeks now, along with a number of activists intent on stopping the building of the TMT. Are you with us, Kahukahi?
Hi, aloha, aloha.
Thanks so much for joining us. I know it's very early in the morning. They're 5:40 a.m. actually, so I appreciate you joining us. It's probably still dark. Can you tell us why you are where you are, why you're there?
We're up here on the slopes of Mauna Kea, also known as Mauna Kea. As you mentioned, we're at the 9,200 feet level, right across the visitor center. Yesterday actually made 3 weeks since we started our encampment here on the mountain. And we are here to stop and to not allow any further desecration of our sacred mountain. As I just heard Professor Osorio mentioning that the state of Hawaii had designated these lands as conservation lands. And so on Hawaii Island, for regular households, the tallest a building can be is 3 stories. In the hotel areas and the developmental districts, those are the tallest it can be is 7 stories. And then here, at the peak of a mountain, standing at 13,000 feet high, in lands designated as conservation, they have approved, they being the state of Hawaii and the courts, have approved a huge, huge telescope that would be 2 stories below ground, 18 stories above the ground, 34,000 square feet, an 8-acre footprint with 3,400 feet of new road. This is comparable in size to Aloha Stadium, which is a 50,000 person capacity stadium here in Hawaii on the island of Oahu, but this would just be much taller. And so it's absolutely ridiculous, we think, that they are able to justify having a building that size on a sacred mountain and in lands designated as conservational. And so we're here to hold the state, hold the university, hold these developers accountable, because this is just, we think it's absolutely ludicrous that they would be able to justify this.
Now, Jonathan Osorio, there's the jobs argument, which we often hear. We hear this a lot, for example, with relation to the Keystone XL pipeline, and that these projects will bring jobs to the local economy. How do you respond?
I don't know how many jobs this construction will bring to the local economy. I do know that that is the familiar kind of argument that they bring out, that people bring out whenever you're talking about a project that has other kinds of impacts. And the fact of the matter is that we really don't know how many jobs they're talking about, and we also don't know, you know, we also don't. This has been really the point of value of Hawaii. There has never been since the 1950s and early 1960s a comprehensive look at the way we use land and how we might use it more profitably and more beneficially to the communities here. We've basically gone on this notion that if you have an investor and they're willing to spend $1.4 or $1.5 billion to build something, that this must be good for the economy. Whether or not it actually is good for the economy takes a little more analysis than this. Where does the bulk of the money go? Isn't it true that that most of the money will go to the crafting of the lenses and the mirrors? That this is really a fairly large project and economically beneficial to lots of people, and not necessarily those who live on the island. I found it really interesting that TMT apparently, as a part of its negotiations with people on Hawaii Island, have recently promised, you know, to use local labor. Does that mean that they never used local labor before for all of those other telescopes? And it makes, this is the thing about the thing about Hawaiian land, is it is extremely valuable from the real estate sense, from the development sense, from the investment sense. But to those of us who live here, and those of us who live on the island, those of us who live on the land here, and those of us who trace our lineage on these lands back 2,000 years, more than 100 generations, this land has a different kind of value. And that value is vested in the fact that we consider ourselves descendants, you know, of that land. We consider ourselves related to it.
I want to turn back to Kahi, who is on Mauna Kea right now for 3 weeks. There was an op-ed that was published in Kaleo on Monday. This is the UH newspaper, by an undergraduate student named Alexis Acohido, and she wrote, quote, "I feel proud that the most powerful telescope ever built would be in Hawaii. All I could think about while listening to the presentation about the telescope was how awe-inspiring it would be. As a native Hawaiian, I feel that it is important to acknowledge our heritage, but we shouldn't blind ourselves to the future." Well, Kahi, how do you respond to that?
Well, that's one person's perspective, and of course, everyone's entitled to their opinion, and I respect that. However, to say that we are blinding ourselves to the future by simply standing up for what we believe in and protecting, as Professor Osorio said, our ancestor. Yeah, we physically come from this land, and you cannot put any value on that. Our ancestors found Hawaii because they were extremely skilled scientists. They were able to look into the heavens and study the path and the movement of the stars, study the path and the movement of the moon and the sun and the winds and the currents and the swells and tides and they basically, in a time where most of the world thought that the world was flat, our ancestors were sailing across and traveling across the largest ocean in the world, thousands and thousands of miles. They weren't simply floating on a log and getting lucky and finding land. They set off with a purpose. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew exactly where they were going. And they knew these things because they were extremely skilled scientists.
Let me just ask you, because we only have a few minutes left, Kahukai, how long are you planning on staying where you are at the 9,200-foot level, where the visitor center is, where a lot of the astronomers who hope to use the TMT acclimate themselves before they go to the summit to do their observing? Where do you, or at least that's how it used to be when I was a graduate student, now it's all computer run, but how long do you plan on staying where you're at?
as long as it takes. As long as it takes until we can put a stop to this, or at the very least until we can get these machines off of our mountain. They've had a moratorium on this construction for about a week and a half now, and they're scheduled to begin again on Monday. But as long as the machines are on the mountain, then we feel that it's absolutely necessary for us to be here. The TMT and the TMT officials in their project, we feel, have not been very transparent with us. They've been, in a sense, very sneaky. And so as long as the machines are here on the mountain, we will be here on the mountain.
So finally...
And we've got to stay until it's absolutely an end is put to it.
Jonathan Osorio, tell us a little bit about the broad swell of demonstrations and protest around this issue that's even gone beyond Hawaii. There have been even celebrities like Jason Momoa, who has Native Hawaiian ancestry from Game of Thrones. He signed on. There's a social media campaign called We Are Mauna Kea. There was a campus walkout earlier this year that you participated in that took place in protest of the TMT. It's pretty strong.
Yeah, I believe that it's coming out of a sense of frustration that people really, the people who live in Hawaii really have no control over, where this economy goes or what happens to the land or what happens to communities. If you lived in Hawaii, you would have seen this transformation over the last 50 or 60 years. And what has happened is that real estate has become so expensive that only a few people really can afford to own. We see a sort of sky as the limit, and that's really quite appropriate for Mauna Kea. We see a kind of sky as the limit for what land can actually cost here. And when you take a place that is so beautiful and gracious and majestic as Mauna Kea, and you say, we can even build whatever we want on the top of that mountain, then really the message you're sending is that no place is safe. It doesn't really matter, whether you have lived for generations in a particular community. If there's enough money and enough promises made for jobs and economic improvement, no place is safe.
Well,
your home is not safe.
I want to thank both of you so much for joining us today, and we'll post information about the We Are Mauna Kea protests on our website, uprisingwithsonali.com, later today. Thank you so much. My guests are Jonathan Osorio, professor at the Kamakakuokalani Center for Hawaiian Studies at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and Kahukahi Kanuha, who is an activist who's been camping on Mauna Kea at the 9,000-foot level for weeks now, along with a number of others intent on stopping the building of the 30-meter telescope, which is slated to be the world's largest optical telescope. This is Uprising. Bipasha Shom is our senior producer. Anna Abbas is our assistant producer. Christian Beck is our production coordinator. Alexander Hobbs is our technical director. And Federico Garcia is our audio engineer. Annie Mendoza is our social media coordinator. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/uprisingwithsonali. Our website is uprisingwithsonali.com, and our theme music is by Quetzal. I'm Sonali Kolhatkar, host and executive producer of Uprising. I'll see you tomorrow.